We're here in Ash Hollow on the Great Western Trail to tell the story of Almon W. Babbitt. And this is part of a history project as well that I'm working on about the Mormon Danites. And the story goes that Babbitt was one of an early activists with the Church of Latter-day Saints. He was one of the original people that was a missionary up in Canada, and around the 1830s, the late 1830s, he was charged with finding basically anti-church literature. He would collect the propaganda and dispose of it. And this naturally led him to butt heads with people in the community. So he was kind of in the same crowd as the people who were trying to push back against the people that were attempting to kill the Mormons. So he became very well known in the community, and when the Battle of Nauvoo happened, he was one of the 3 men to sign a surrender, which basically said the Mormons are leaving Nauvoo. This left him in very bad standing with a lot of people in the church, and in 1844, he was elected to the Illinois House of Representatives. So now he was living 2 lives. On one hand, he was an LDS person who was very high in the church, but he was butting heads with a lot of people because he had signed this surrender, and he was also kind of opposing Brigham Young's leadership. And on the other hand, he was in the pocket of the federal government because in his capacity as a House of Representatives in Illinois, these 2 things conflicted with each other. So he comes over here to Utah, or passes through here to Utah in 1848 with Brigham Young, and he only continues butting heads, but he does make a name for himself as a skilled orator, negotiator, and politician. Pretty much as soon as the Mormons had settled in the Salt Lake Valley, they began petitioning to create a state which they called Deseret. And they wanted this state to have democratically elected officials, therefore they couldn't claim territorial status. They wanted statehood, desperately, because they knew that D.C. would only send in anti-Mormon politicians. And so at this meeting you had 2 men, John W. Bernheisel and Almon Babbitt. So Babbitt was kind of a maverick. He wanted to do things his own way, and he saw great benefit if he could draft up his own petition for the state of Deseret and make it to DC even faster. And Bernheisel was kind of an establishment figure, so he just waited for the church to draft up the petition, and he made his way over there, completely unaware of the fact that Babbitt was already halfway to DC. Well, by the time Bernheisel gets there, he hears that Babbitt has already petitioned for it. They denied it, but they granted it territorial status. So Babbitt comes back and he says, "Congrats guys, we're a territory and I'm the treasurer." So immediately they start viewing Babbitt as this not only bad man, because he's already arguing with church leadership, but they view him as a traitor, somebody who dashed their hopes at statehood in order to become a treasurer. And of course, as treasurer, you get a lot of perks and a lot of money flows through your pockets, and you're already kind of in good terms with the federal government. So if anything should befall you and any kind of legal trouble happens, the federal government will bail you out. And this happened time and time again because the federal courts favored strongly the federal officials, of course. So Brigham Young was making all these statements saying that he was a fool and he deserved to have his throat cut, and he goes back and forth from Washington D.C. a whole lot. And he goes to Washington D.C. in 1856. It's his 22nd time in D.C. And as he's coming back, he passes through Fort Kearny, which is 100 or so miles over to the east of here, and up ahead is a party which is attacked by Cheyenne, and they lose several members of this wagon party, and one of the children shows up at Fort Laramie, kidnapped by Cheyenne, so we know that the Cheyenne were in the area. So Babbitt waits a little while and takes out as an advance party with 2 other people, and he shows up dead several days later. Now nobody knows who killed Babbitt, but the conjecture was that he was killed by Cheyenne. This was even told in his obituary in the paper that he helped create. But even though the Danites hadn't existed since 1838, and when the Mormons left Nauvoo, when they left Missouri, when they left that area and they came out here, there was a lot of conjecture that they stayed around and that they were what was called Brigham's avenging angels, or destroying angels, that these men would be sort of mountain men sent out on the prairie to execute people. We're standing now in front of the Margaret Hickman cabin. And the reason why we're here is because it was built in the 1850s by a man named Wild Bill Hickman. He had been a Mormon pioneer for a long time and had settled the valley with Brigham Young, and later in his life, after his time being a Utah territorial legislator and a U.S. Marshal, he left Utah in exile, claiming to be the chief of the Danites as they existed within the state, something which senior Mormon leadership and Brigham Young firmly denied. According to them, the Danites had ceased to exist since they left Illinois. And one of the things, I can't find the source for this, but I was told that a party discovered Babbitt's remains with a cross placed over them. Now, why would the Cheyenne give a Christian burial to somebody they had scalped and bonked on the back of the head with a tomahawk? Doesn't really make sense to me. Now, 1856 anti-Mormon conspiracies, kind of a niche subject, but it would constitute an assassination of a federal official by the very early LDS Church, and also constitute proof that the Danites existed for well over a decade after they officially ceased existing. And a lot of people might think that they continued even a good period of time after Babbitt's assassination. But all we know is that he was killed here in Ash Hollow.